Good afternoon, and welcome to Lunching with Books, sponsored by Friends of the Library. I am not Harold Plunkett. He is in charge of this, but he is in California with his grandbaby's first birthday. So as chairman of the membership committee, then I got relegated to doing the introduction, but I'm more than happy to do that because Joe Edd is a very good friend of mine. If you are a member of Friends of the Library, we thank you for that. And if you're not, we'd welcome you to join us. They're out on your table. All you have to do is contribute at least $10 a year, and you will be a friend of the library. And we use that to buy the bookmobile. We use it to sponsor events like this. And also we provide books to the library. So that's not a lot to invest for $10, and we would welcome you joining us. We're over 500 strong now, but we'd like to get up to 1,000, because those of you that know me know that I'm quite ambitious. I do want to thank Philip and Shirley for taking up our money today, Dr. Bill and Lucy for serving us, and Miss Bonnie is the one that gets our chips and our drinks and our ice. She does a lot for Jeff, and of course, we'd all be lost without Jeff Tomlinson, who's the director of the library. It is my distinct pleasure now to introduce my friend, Joe Edd Morris, and he's going to preview his new book, The Devil Walks at Midnight. And for those of you who know about Lee-Itawamba County, you probably know about 20 Mile Bottom. I'm not from here, but a lot of people know where that is. Joe Edd is a psychologist and a retired United Methodist minister. And believe it or not, he is a world-renowned author. If you don't believe that, I'm going to tell you a story that will make you believe that. Curtis and I were sitting in Sydney, Australia, overlooking Sydney Harbor, and in talking to the waiter, he found out that we were from Tupelo, Mississippi. And he said, well, I know an author from Tupelo. So we immediately started guessing, you know, that it was probably John Grisham, and he just had his cities wrong. And he said, oh, no, said, I've got his book. So he goes back and he brings Joe Edd's first novel, Land of My Father. So I would think that's pretty world-renowned. He is author of Land Where My Fathers Died. That was his first novel. The Prison. Both of these were awarded the best fiction by Mississippi Library Association. He wrote Torched, summer of '64, and that won the Eric Hoffer Grand Prize, Montaigne Medal, and Maxie Awards finalist, The Lost Page and The Lost Gospel, and his short stories have appeared in numerous literary journals. In August, Land Where My Fathers Died, which is, as I said, his first novel, is being reissued by its current publisher, and the sequels to it, Inherit the Land and The Will, are being released in October and December. He and his wife, Sandi, live in Tupelo. He has a private practice in psychology, and he enjoys traveling, gardening, playing the piano, and obviously writing. Help me welcome Joe Edd Morris.
Thank you, Janice. We have a celebrity among us, and it is not I. A celebrity is someone who has national prominence, someone who is known in national circles, and that is not I. I'm a small fry. I'm only famous at Doyle's Restaurant in Sydney, Australia. Several years ago, I'm not going to say how many years ago, a number of years ago, a young lady came to Tupelo, and she was a secretary, and I don't know all the details. I don't remember all the details. And she told someone, and the word got around, that she was being considered for the National Secretary of the Year. and that she was in the top 4 or 5. I don't remember those details either. And she told some of her friends that she would never get it because she said, I'm a redneck from Mississippi. And I say white instead of white, and I say rice instead of rice, and I say bright instead of bright. When the sun had set and the dust had cleared, she blew her competition off the stage, overwhelmed the judges. It is always an honor to be introduced by Janice Malvern Trawick. This is the second time you've introduced me, and I've heard that story, and you always get it right. So, she also has gone on to be, she became secretary of the Rotary District, and then, I think, district governor. And then the Tupelo Medical Group for what, 15 years? And when Janice is in charge of anything, the trains run on time. She is very efficient. I could say a lot more, but she'd get upset with me. But anyway, thank you again. We almost had another celebrity here today, but she has some medical problems and couldn't come and told me that she couldn't be here. She is arguably the most prolific author in the history of Mississippi. Her books have been published in 17 or 18 foreign languages. If you go to Amazon and you put her name in, and I'm going to tell you that in a minute, you probably already know who I'm talking about. You're down at the bottom of the page, it's got numbers 1 through 10 where you can click on those and go to the next page. If you put her name in up there, it goes on and on and on and on and on, all these books. She's a hard worker. I mean, to publish that many books. She started out in the romance genre, and I have to confess that I kind of poo-pooed that at first, 'cause I thought that was beneath me to write a romance novel. You know, I consider myself one of these literary folks. But she moved into mainstream literature, mainstream fiction. I would encourage you to go get a copy if you don't have one and read Peggy Webb's The Language of Silence. It will be, it's inspiring, it's lyrical, it's just a great piece of work. And I'm sorry she's not here today, and I told her I was going to toss her a rose. So if y'all know Peggy, go tell her some nice things were said about it, because I don't know how to say this. She deserves more recognition than she gets. And I think we need to know some things about her that I wanted to share with you. We have another celebrity. We just got a bunch of celebrities today. When I was growing up in New Albany, and I mean I'm 9 and 10, 11, 12 years old, I would see these adult Sunday school books scattered around the house. And this guy's picture was on, very handsome guy. And I entered the Methodist ministry, and I keep on seeing the books. Now, y'all, this is 1960. He is probably the most prolific educational writer in the United Methodist Church, and I'm talking about Roy H. Ryan, sitting right over there. And Roy, you still look good to me. My mother once said, beauty is as beauty does. Well, handsome is as handsome does, and you've done a lot of great things, so there you are. Roy also is partially responsible or helped with this book, but I got to back up just a ways. I think I shared this with this group before, how this book came to be. Sandi and I were at a restaurant called Country Kitchen over on, what's the name of the street, Meadowbrook or what? Longdale. And Phyllis Harper was sitting at the table with us. And Phyllis Harper starts telling this story about this woman that disappeared over in 20 Mile Bottom. The words were out of her mouth, and I started pulling the napkins out of the napkin holder, and I started taking notes. I still have those napkins. I was looking for them. I know they're in a box under the house somewhere, but I started writing on those napkins what she was telling me. And some of the stuff in here that you read, it came straight from Phyllis Harper. It made it from those napkins into this book. And unfortunately, she's not here today to receive this recognition. But she was a raconteur, could tell you story after story after story. What can I say? But this novel is based on a true story. Now, how Roy fits into that, I called and told him one day, I said, I think you lived over in 20 Mile Bottom, or you're familiar with it. And he said, oh, yeah. Well, bottom line is, we took a day and went over there and drove all over 20 Mile Bottom. Now, I want y'all to understand that this 20 Mile Bottom in this book is not the 20 Mile Bottom that you are familiar with over in Lee-Itawamba County. And I dedicated this book to my friend George Dent. And George, I want you to understand that because of all the weird characters and strange people in this that have no reflection on you whatsoever. But I also want you to know, I hope I don't need your services from somebody in 20 Mile Bottom who gets upset with some of my descriptions of where they live. But it's an interesting place. But Roy, we drove all over the place. I saw the photos the other day. I started going through and seeing them of the bridges and all this kind of stuff. We did. So Roy had a big hand in helping with this. It was back in the fall that we did that. But he drove me by the house of the former Ed-Morris County Sheriff, Don Spradlin. You remember that? And Sheriff Spradlin, or ex-Sheriff Spradlin, ushered us into his little dining area, and we sat there around a round table and listened to him talk about this story that actually happened. This woman that was supposedly thrown down a well, but they never could find her. She was missing. Her first name was Nell. I can't remember her last name, and probably don't need to. But anyway, this is based on a true story. The rest is fiction. I want to emphasize that. Also, this novel has been a work in progress since here is 1992. I submitted it as a short story, 20 Mile Bottom. It started out as a short story. Actually, it started out with a young kid wanting to be a wrestler, and it was called Jacob's Ladder. So it's come a long way from being Jacob's Ladder. But things evolve in interesting ways. I got a letter from one publisher. I can't believe I didn't put it in here. Well, I can't believe that, too. He said, oh, here it is. He said, this is the third time that I've reviewed this short story. And he said, you write well, but I'm not interested in the story. It just doesn't really grab me. So I think your errors with 20 Mile Bottom are one of excess. I wish he could read it now. I wonder what he might say. It's not like you lack talent, but I just don't accept your short story. Well, writing is a physical sport. I mean, you get knocked down, you get you get all these, my kids cannot believe I would write because I don't handle rejection really well. But that's part of the game. You just get rejected and rejected, but you stay with it. You stay with it. You keep on, and eventually, if you keep on, then something nice will come out of it. This story has a lot of moving parts. When I was 12 years old, my mother took me to Myrtle, Mississippi. Can y'all hear me okay? She took me to Myrtle, Mississippi. I got some New Albany friends over here. They know Myrtle, Mississippi. And do you remember Percy Ray? Percy Ray had a church in Myrtle. Percy Ray was an evangelist of note who attracted people from all over the country. And they had a huge complex there. And he preached this sermon, and I don't know if it was on Halloween, but it was called The Devil Walks at Midnight. That ring a bell? Way, way back then. My mother took me to that worship service, and it started at midnight, and I questioned her wisdom in taking me at midnight to a worship service. And after I got there and saw what I saw, I even questioned her wisdom. But Roy, you once said that I'm afraid that the devil walks at midnight, and I'm probably afraid of that. That's why I go to bed early. I probably got this from my mama way, way back there because I saw the devil walk at midnight. He had Percy Ray. He's dead, George. I hope he can't sue me. He would put on a devil's outfit with a pitchfork, and he had a bucket, a pail, and he had a lantern down in the pail, and he would walk around the church, and he would get up in your face, and he would pull the pail out and said, the hellfire is coming now. Repent. I mean, I cannot tell you what it scared out of me. But I've never forgotten it. And obviously I've never forgotten it because Percy Ray and The Devil Walks at Midnight found his way into this book. But then there's this group of people over in Tarleton County, in 20 Mile Bottom, fictional group of people. For one, as a psychologist, I had to go to workshops, and one I went to in Jackson for the Disability Association. This guy was telling about the biggest fraud in the history of disability fraud. And he said there was this one county in Georgia, and the name was Tarleton County, and it had 500 people on disability that were schizophrenics. That was just a little bit more than the norm. And so it raised some red flags, and they went over and investigated, and they found out there was this one woman who's the queen bee, and she was leading the charge, and she was helping them get on disability, telling them how to cheat, telling them how to lie, and they would pay her a certain amount, and she would get some of the returns, a certain percentage. So I took Tarleton County and those 500 people, and I plopped them over in 20 Mile Bottom. I took Percy Ray over there in Myrtle, Mississippi, and The Devil Walks at Midnight, and I plopped him down in 20 Mile Bottom. And the rest, folks, is an interesting story. May I? I begin with this. Be not deceived by words of the plaintiff's song, Old Man River, he must know something, but don't know nothing, but don't say nothing. Rivers speak. In a place far from the noise of the world, when the moon was full and the air still, have you not listened to a river or a stream? Tuned your ear, heard the murmur of myth, the whisper of ancient secrets, the rush of untold horrors? In that silvery music of the night, have you not heard songs of heartbreak, of mysteries unsolved, lives swept away, deaths unexplained? My name is 20 Mile Creek. You may not have heard of me, but I've been around a long time. I was here when the buffalo beat a path from the Mississippi River across the bottom, named for me, to the salt licks around what is now Nashville. I saw the Indians use the path to kill the buffalo. Then the white man used it to kill the Indians and take the land for themselves. In that abusive process, They gave the path that crossed me a name, Devil's Backbone. Early on, lawbreakers became fond of me. Felons from British gaols settled along my banks. Bandits, cutthroats, and sidewinders killed their own, trampled through my waters. I heard children cry as they were swung by their heels, their head bashed against trees. I heard men scream as they hung by their thumbs, their hide removed with bowie knives, strip by strip. I heard kidnapped slaves kicking and hollering as they were dragging through my waters, many a black body, bellies ripped open, found along my banks. I listened to booze flow on steamy nights, women squeal with ecstasy, and bandits fight over booty. In more recent times, other mysterious crimes I have witnessed. In 1965, on an Easter morning, a mother and two daughters vanished, along with the car they were riding in to church. One minute they were beside my banks, about to cross the bridge, the next they were gone. From that day, none had been found, nor a single part of the car. 10 years later, on Halloween, beside my banks, a young white man who refused to conspire with a drug ring was lynched. Sheriff's deputies found only his neck and head in the noose dangling from the limb where he was hanged. Folk in 20 Mile Bottom say his body still roams the hills in search of his head. By the way, those stories are true. That's not fiction. Those things happened, per the sheriff. If you ever come to see me in the northeast hills of Mississippi, and I hope you do, you'll discover I'm not easy to find. When you finally do stumble upon 20 Mile Bottom, after you adjust your eyes to its sudden depth and scope, you'll see me running through it. At flood stage, I've washed from valley wall to valley wall, taken out roads and bridges, carried off whole houses, whisked away livestock, sometimes human life. Those words are direct from Phyllis Harper, from the napkin. I listen. I learn. I feel the heartbreak of people whose lives I thread, feel their pulse as they feel mine. Looking over that calm and pastoral scene, you'll have no inkling. This is a place where bushwhackers and snakes and panthers come out at night, where the ghosts of buggers jump from thickets and halt moving vehicles, wring the necks off the living, where the wind blows in the hollows so hard folk liken it to the sound of a wildcat in labor, where there is no good to speak of, where evil lurks. You'll have no inkling. This is a place where the devil walks at midnight. You'll have no inkling, not the slightest hint, unless you hang around a while and listen. We have another celebrity in our group, and she's going to fuss at me. But she has been a motivational speaker. She's impersonated notable comedians. One was Lily Tomlin, and she just established a name for herself with that. She has given presentations all over the state and around the country. I've asked her to come today and to help me. Wanda Dent.
Yeah, I want to do that. I'm so honored to be here, but it makes me just a little bit nervous because I'm hoping I can do justice to Joe Edd's words. A pickup pulled into the dirt drive that ended at the front steps of the house. From inside the house, a man walked onto the porch. A toothpick hung from the corner of one side of his thin lips, and a knot of tobacco bulged from the other. He was holding a wide-mouthed mason jar in his right hand. The man driving the pickup truck got out and approached the porch. He was barrel-chested, and from the nose down, his face was all mustache, flecked with gray. A cigarette was pressed flat in one corner of his mouth. He stood for a moment, as if awaiting an invitation to join the man on the porch and sit, but the man on the porch said nothing, just looked at him. Juke, the barrel. Can I start over? Juke! And y'all, if I'm too loud, do that. Okay. Juke, the barrel-chested man said. Yother, replied the man on the porch. Doing all right. Yep, how about that ammo shipment? Clockwork, said Yother. Young feller was nervous as a whore in church, but he's on time. He's nervous every time, Juke confirmed. Gets in, cranks the motor before we even get the last case, takes off without waving or saying bye. He's got the willies or something. He delivers, though. Got no complaints. Well, let me give you one, Yother said. His brown eyes loomed large like polluted pools in the lumpy contours of his face. Don't need none. Might need this'n. How's that? Juke asked. There's a stranger among us. Don't tell. Do? Who's it? Juke inquired curtly. Don't know. If I did, he wouldn't be a stranger. Juke leaned forward on the porch railing, one side of his lips pursed, the other side clamped on a toothpick. Juice oozed from the side that was pursed, and he spat a running stain over the railing and then squint-eyed the man below him. Yother, you didn't drive all the way over here to be a smart-ass, he snapped. Who's the son of a bitch? Just heard he is over at the Jottam down. The man that told me said he is looking for Excel, said he is kin to him. Yep, know all about that, Juke revealed. I was there. Hell for, exclaimed Yother. Why didn't you say so in the first place? 'Cause I'm in charge, just making sure you're on top of things. Well, you think he is or ain't? Ain't what? Juke asked, irritation in his voice. A agent! Juke looked down, thought a moment, the toothpick moving side to side as though it measured the rhythm of his thinking. The toothpick stopped and he looked up. Don't know. He drove into the bottom, checked out the Province place. Eula Fay, Excel's daughter, called, said a car stopped in front of the house, matched the description of his. She said it just stopped. Nobody got out. Something's troubling about that, though. Yeah, he spat. Eula Fay said he is eyeing the old Province place, the one that burned. A long pause. He was writing something down, Juke said. A longer pause. If he was so hell-bent to see Excel, drove all this way, you'd think he'd at least get out of the car and knock on the door, opined Yother. You'd think. Maybe he wasn't sure it was the right place. He'd been going up and down the bottom, stopping and asking. Shit you say, Juke said. Shit I say? Ratliff at the Jottam down already told him where Excel lived, Juke said. Gave directions an imbecile could follow. Why's he asking if he already knows? Can't figure this one, Juke remarked. He don't look like no agent, don't talk like one neither. Going around asking about Excel's kind of is bothersome. He rolled his tongue in his cheek, squeezed his eyes, and spit again. We got to do more than keep an eye on him. Harass him a little, like we did with them last uns that come calling. Make him show his colors. You think Sister Delphine ought to know? Yep, just ain't got around to it. She ain't never too concerned. Them gypsies, they protected by spells. She's something else. Ain't that the God's truth? I mean, she's really something, Yother ventured, grinned, and winked. I ain't going there. This here's business. Strictly business, Juke, Yother rejoined, smothering a smirk. Keep me informed, Yother. If push comes to shove, I'll give the signal, he said, and saluted. Y'all know what to do. I'd say if he keeps on asking about Excel, that's shove. I'd say. Yother tossed the cigarette on the ground and mashed it with his heel, raised a hand in dismissal. Yep, strictly business, he grinned, and got back in the pickup truck and drove off. Oh, this one's my favorite. And you know why Joette asked me, right? Because I speak redneck fluently. My sweet husband George speaks Spanish and I speak redneck. We're a perfect match, aren't we? All right, so this is my favorite part, and this is a piece of the sermon that the preacher preaches at midnight. So we'll go from there. And if I'm too loud, give me the signal because I practice real loud. Chase could hear the men beside him breathing. The whole building seemed to breathe. Trapped wind rising and falling, seeking a hole to escape. He ceased wondering what would happen next, so wrong he had been so far, so totally mystified by the strange, turned bizarre, turned macabre. So from the rafters, sorry, I had cataract surgery and I can't see as well as I should. It wouldn't surprise him to suddenly see skeletons bungee plunging from the rafters, jack-o'-lanterns bobbing over the altar, witches astride besom handles galloping the aisles as a wave of something terrified he could not name closed in around him. The prospect of high-leaping flames swept his vision. Then, brothers and sisters of New Eden! The voice, shrill and nasal, was coming from the front, screeching through the air like a bird of prey. What evil lurks within you, around you? Search your souls, look about, find them, yank them, cast them out, now! The devil walks at midnight and he's in your midst. A dark figure toward the back rose and took a step toward the door. Don't nobody leave! The voice screamed, drawn out like something thin and metallic twanging in the air. Don't turn your back on God! The devil strike you dead! The figure returned to its seat. Beware of the red light of hell, the voice cried. Let none be caught unawares, blinded by its glare, seared by its heat, branded by its flame. Cash's eyes were adjusting to the dark. He could still see the glow from the bucket the preacher was carrying. The voice continued. The midnight hour doth come, and now is when the devil walks. Be not like foolish virgins when the bridegroom came and knew them not and shut the door before them. Be not like the man who wore no wedding garment to the wedding. He was bound hand and foot, cast into outer darkness. The outer dark is near. It's always there, always around you. Near at hand is the kingdom. Be not cast into it. Moans rose from the congregation. The hour is coming, and now's when the dead shall hear the Son of God, and they that hear shall live. They shall dwell in the garden, the fruits on the vine, the fish in the river. They shall not work or crawl on their bellies, The Lord will provide. They shall not fear snakes nor temptations. But woe unto you who work, who wrap your hearts in that sin. Allow it to infest your souls. Run through the valleys and the byways of your minds. Bind and shackle you in every way imaginable to man and God. You, he howled, sweeping the pitchfork over the congregation, shall not hear the Son of Man when he comes. Not the first ripple of sound will touch your ears. They will be stopped as though sealed with hot tar. Repent now. Forsake work. For your own sake, for the sake of the congregation, for the sake of the garden. Save yourself. He tossed the pitchfork and it clattered to the floor. Before the fire from hell bursts upon you and burns you to ashes, he cried. A fiery light exploded upward from the bucket, illumining the preacher's devilish shape. Swoons and gasps rose from the shuddering crowd. The building shook.
You can't imagine a preacher wrote that, can you? Babe is retired, I guess. And Roy and I were asked to come and talk about a book that we had written, Old Testament Stories, What Do They Say Today? And Babe said there was one condition, that we couldn't get preachy and we couldn't talk religion too much, just stick with the book. I went first, and I'm afraid of Babe, so I stayed with the program. Roy got up here, and it was less than a minute, and he was already preaching. And it was a good sermon, too. I'm going to conclude, because I think we have time for questions, do we? Okay. I'm just going to flip over to the end and read the last paragraph or so. You can tell I was there, 12 years old, in that church in Myrtle, Mississippi, I believe. This is toward the end. His thoughts, and those are Chase, the agent, disability agent who's investigating. His thoughts went back to 20 Mile Bottom, and he reflected on a novel he had read recently. It was Albert Camus' The Plague, about a city taken over by rats and a plague. The efforts of one brave doctor to save the populace, the jubilant cries of joy at the eventual eradication of the disease, and the doctor's sobering thoughts at the end. The plague never dies or disappears for good. It would rouse its rats again and send them forth to die in a happy city. 20 Mile Bottom lay burned and devastated. Eventually, green shoots would spring forth from the ash. People would return. A Savior would appear. A church would flourish. People would believe. Now, folks, is there some things that are going on today that resonate with that? Leave you with that thought. Thank you, Wanda. You did a marvelous job. I told her even if she messed up, that nobody would know the difference given the subject matter. It wouldn't. Y'all have any questions you would like to ask? Any comments? Yes, ma'am.
Have any of your books been made into movies?
I'm sorry?
Have any of your books been made into movies?
They have not.
Have you been asked?
I have. And they've all been shams. I mean, I get these emails that people that tell me they've read this book and that book, and the one I get the most is a book that's hadn't been published. And I told the publisher Westbow to quit publishing it, and I still get calls on this book. They want to make it in a movie, and it's not even published anymore. So you know it's bogus when that happens. You know, I don't. I think some of them would make a good movie with a good director, producer, but no, not yet. There are movies in my head. Who? Roy.
Maybe a little dangerous, so let me get up. Okay. As you might imagine, I have a lot of memories of 20 Mile Bottom. That was the place that my dad and I went fishing on Saturday afternoons. We had to work 5.5 days in the fields, but my dad believed in fishing almost as much as he did in farming. So that was a wonderful experience. The second anecdote is that that's when I learned to grapple on fish. You know what grappling is? You hem the fish up, and then you go in and you grab them. You stir the water up till it gets muddy, and the fish come up to the top, and you go under the banks and get with the snakes and everything else. And that, the first fish I caught grappling was a gar, G-A-R, and they have long snouts. I got rid of that in a hurry and never grappled again. The third is a more serious story. We had a lot of overflows when we had excess rain, and the canals would overflow in the creek. We had both a creek and a canal. We were going over to the canal where the water was up to the top of the banks. I would say I was about 8 or 9 years old. I had not yet learned to swim. Of course, you learn to swim on your own when you're a country boy. You go in swimming in the canal, and if there's some older boys, they might help you learn, but I hadn't learned to swim. Fortunately, I had an older brother, 14 years my senior, who was with me. But I got up too close to the water and slid into the overflowing canal. And I don't know how many times I went under, but probably twice, before my brother could get to me and pull me out of that raging water. So I almost lost my life in 20 Mile Bottom.
You leave me speechless, Roy. I'm glad that you didn't lose your life. I mean, it almost sounds like John Wesley, you know, being saved out of that house fire. Yeah.
It was a brand plucked from the water.
Anything else? Thank you for those anecdotes. Janice, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you for coming. Always a pleasure.
Got a couple of books here for the library, and I signed
Oh,
them.
thank you. Very good.
That's not a bookmark in there, by the way.
Okay. Lori? Lori is with Reed's, and she has several of his books for sale if y'all would like one. She can take cash, credit card, or check, whatever. And Joed, I would assume you might sign them?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. And thank y'all again for coming. We really do appreciate it. And we'll see you next month when Steve Holland will review Robert Kayat's book, The 60s, Race, something in Politics. Anyway, sounds good. Thank you again, Joed. Appreciate it.